Welcome to the Lead Defend podcast, a show designed to help you grow in faith and leadership as you navigate the stages of young adulthood. We address important faith topics and provide practical life tips, helping you build up your faith as you engage a changing culture. Now, here are your hosts.
Hey, welcome back to Lead Defend Podcast. This is Ryan. I'm here with Brock, and we've got a special guest, Tyler Sykora, with us. Now, am I pronouncing that last name right?
You are, yep, Tyler Sykora. Yep.
Now, Tyler, I just learned that you were a football phenom at the Southern Arkansas University.
Yeah.
There's some mule riders that listen in regularly, so that's good stuff. Now, what year did you graduate there?
I graduated with my undergraduate degree in 2012, master's degree in 2015, and then my last year to play football was 2014, I believe.
All right, so 2014 grad from SAU, but you came from Hot Springs, so you're an Arkansan, born and bred.
Yep.
Good stuff, good stuff. Well, Brock, give us a little bit of your history with Tyler. How did you first meet Tyler?
Yeah, so Tyler and I were student leaders here at Midwestern Seminary. We're getting to record again today from the Spurgeon Library here, and we were students together, had classes together, and kind of formed a friendship with that, and had a great seminary experience. Tyler's still here pursuing some PhD work, and so while we were up here, I said, I got to get this guy on the podcast.
Now, Tyler, tell us honestly, what kind of student was Brock?
He's a great student.
Oh, okay.
I think Brock and I had really good conversations throughout our student leadership days. We were always bouncing things off of each other. Brock was involved in student ministry. At that point, I had done a lot of internships and been involved in the church, but hadn't actually formally served in a ministry role, so got to ask him a lot of questions.
Now, full transparency, Tyler serves on staff at Midwestern, so he probably can't technically slander a former student for his studies or anything. Is that right?
That's not good for enrollment.
No, not good for enrollment at all. Tyler, where do you serve now?
So I serve in the President's Office at Midwestern Seminary. I'm Dr. Jason Allen's Chief of Staff. I've been doing that for 2 years now. Before that, I was his research assistant, and then also worked in the admissions office as like a recruitment specialist, whatever that means. Basically, we travel and recruit some, give campus tours, but have been at Midwestern for about 6 years
now. Chief of Staff sounds really fancy. What in the world do you do?
Yeah, probably too fancy. I help run the President's Office at Midwestern Seminary and oversee Dr. Allen's schedule, his events, speaking. I help him edit and do personal things, oversee the basic functions and events that the trustees are involved in. So that's kind of one of my bigger responsibilities is helping serve the trustees, getting them here twice a year.
Yeah.
We do a lot of events in the President's Office, so lecture tours, lecture events. So like in the fall, we have the Spurgeon lectures with Dr. Stephen Lawson coming, help facilitate those. And so it's a bunch of different things. I would say there's not like a list of 4 or 5 things that I mainly do. It's a lot of a grab bag job that helps to hopefully serve Dr. Allen, make his life easier in whatever way that is.
Yeah, and you don't really get to that role without being a leader, right? And that's what we're here to talk about today on the Lead Defend Podcast is leadership. So I guess the first question is, when did you first start recognizing that there were some leadership traits in you? Was it something that you recognized in yourself or something that somebody pointed out?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think growing up, I would say I was back and forth between a leader and a follower. I liked being liked, and so I think that before I was a Christian specifically, and I had any kind of integrity or any kind of foundation on which to lead from, I was back and forth. So depending on what we were doing, if we were doing something that I felt comfortable with, it was no big deal, then I would be happy to lead out. If it was something that I was less familiar with, I would have no problem following. So I would say, really inconsistent before I met Christ and was converted. And so probably recognized that I was a leader, meaning that I had that ability probably around football whenever I began to play quarterback. And I'd always grown up, watching Brett Favre and others, and I'd always heard that quarterbacks had to be the leaders, that they were the ones that commanded the field, that they were the ones that everyone looked to when the game was on the line, that type of thing. So that was always fascinating to me, and I wanted that. I didn't know why, because to be honest, I think I struggled with confidence most of my life with sports. I was very much seeking to be a more balanced player, not be up or not be too down. And so I think that's where I first realized, especially with Pee Wee football, and then played football my sophomore year, and realized that actually people do listen to me. I do have a voice in the huddle. They do look to me whenever the game's on, that type of thing. And so I think that it was probably largely associated with sports.
Yeah, unfortunately for a guy that likes to be liked, sometimes the quarterback's not a popular position either.
That's a good word.
When things don't go well.
That's exactly right. I have been on both sides of that, where you win the game. My redshirt freshman year, we were playing South Alabama. They were ranked. I got to go in the fourth quarter. My redshirt freshman year, I didn't start, but I got to play a lot. And our quarterback, he was a redshirt junior. He twisted his ankle, and so I got to go in, and it was fourth quarter. We were down by 7. I think there was like 30 seconds left, and we ran what's called a smash route with a seam, which if you know football, you understand that terminology. If you don't, that's okay. Basically, they were in a cover 2 defense, and I had to read the safety, and so I had a smash route or a corner route on the outside, and then a slot receiver that was splitting the safeties. And I threw a 75-yard touchdown to send us to overtime, which we ended up winning.
As a freshman?
As a freshman, yeah. It was super fun. One of my best sports memories. But at the same time, there's been moments where I haven't delivered. And say I threw a pick in the fourth quarter that ended up costing us the game. And so being a good leader is leading through adversity oftentimes.
Yeah, so you mentioned one thing. You said you like to be liked. And I think if there's something that really describes this generation of young leaders and young people in general, we're people who like to be liked. You think of social media, case in point. You're posting things that are trying to garner attraction, that to get the likes, get follows. As a young leader, how do you overcome what we might call like fear of man? How do you get past caring about what people think about you so that you can lead? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think I'm still trying to figure that out. The fear of man is something that I think that most Christians would struggle with. I think that it's something that if you don't struggle with, you probably just don't know that you struggle with it. But I think that it is pivotal. If you look in the scriptures all throughout, especially the Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and countless on. So I think that the first and primary thing is understanding who we are in Christ. So I'd say my answer completely changed from before conversion to after, meaning once I was in Christ and I realized who I was, my identity was not in what people said about me. My identity was not in if people liked me or not. My identity was in Christ and what he had done. And that is where I needed to find my comfort, my source. Because if you read the New Testament, not many of the people who were faithful, and if you read the Bible for that matter, not many of the people who were faithful and were good leaders were liked. I mean, if you look at the prophets even, most of them died. They were hated by their own people. And so if our goal in life is to be liked or to garner attention from specifically the public and that are not Christians, that's a fool's errand that will end in heartache and difficulty. But if your goal in life is to fear the Lord and to honor him, that will ground you and give you peace even when people don't like you.
Yeah, and it reminds me in the Gospel of John where it's like there's some leaders who, it says they believe in Jesus, but they won't confess that they believe it because they cared about the glory of man more than the glory of God. Yeah. And so that getting that right is so key for being able to lead even when you're so concerned about people liking you. But you were able to play football and even were able to get to a fairly high level. So will you tell us a little bit about where your football career took you? Sure,
yeah. So played football in high school and was really not very good, to be honest. I had a big brother.
You went to where in high school?
To Jessieville High School. Yep. Okay. Was not very good. My big brother was an all-star at everything he did, but he did not play football. And so I was pretty much...
That was your shot.
That was my shot.
Your avenue to
shine.
Like,
all right, I'm not Zach's little brother when it comes to football, because everywhere else I was known as, Zach Sykora's little brother, which is fine. I love my brother, and he's a great guy. But I wanted to get out of his shadow, and I wanted to play. And I knew, growing up, I always loved throwing the football, and I could throw it a mile. I could throw it really hard. I was not very accurate. It was more so just something fun that I did. Well, anyways, I ended up playing high school, was good enough to get recruited, but not good enough to actually to go far. So I'm not going to tell you through the high school recruiting journey, but ended up at Southern Arkansas, and really they took a chance on me, gave me an opportunity. Coach Keppel was his first year there. We hadn't had a winning season in 20 years, and so it was going into
can't get much worse.
That's right. And so really didn't even know the game of football that well, but through those coaches investing in me, giving me opportunities, and learning to fail a lot, figuring out that that's part of success is learning to fail well. And so anyways, ended up having a career that kind of came out of nowhere. My junior year, we broke several school records. By the end of my career, I had broken 17 school records at SAU, and we had really just done a lot of cool things. My junior year, we were 8-2 and got to make a bowl game, which we lost last second on a field goal. But going into my senior year, I was told I had meetings, interviews with about 30 of the 32 NFL teams, and was told by most of them that at this point, if I have a successful senior year, I could possibly be a late draft pick. No one was promising me anything. In the NFL, it's very much a business, and no one promises anything really. But was told that if I had the same success for my junior year, then I could possibly be a late draft pick, or more than likely I'll just get a free agent deal. And so that was my expectation. That was my hope. Well, my senior year happens, and we don't have the same year. Sure. I don't have the productivity. It still had a decent year. It was not bad. We were 6-4. I think the main thing that I struggled with then was my completion percentage was not near as high as it was the year before. Nonetheless, on draft night, the Kansas City Chiefs called, offered me their rookie mini camp, and then they pulled it about an hour later.
Wow.
Then that was the moment that I realized how much sin and idolatry I had in football. I was so mad because I had so many expectations. I mean, we even had like a draft party, so like family and friends were there, and everyone knew that like there was not really a chance of me getting drafted, but almost everyone expected, because of what my agents were telling me and the scouts were saying, is that I would at least get a deal and get to go prove myself somewhere. It didn't happen, and so heard from the Chiefs, got pulled, and then I sat for like a month of just basically being frustrated. I was still training every day, still doing everything I could to be as ready as I could be. But about a month later, the Seattle Seahawks reached out, invited me to a tryout, basically. So I flew out to Seattle, had a tryout, and I walked off the field thinking, I'm about to be a Seattle Seahawk. I had one of the best practices I'd had. I knew it was going to be a good practice when my first pass I threw was to a slant, and I threw it pretty good. I mean, that was one of the things that the Lord had given me, was a strong arm. And the coach behind me cursed. And so whenever I heard the curse, he was like, the D word, really loud. I was like, dang. I was like, all right, this is going to be a good day.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty funny. Kind of made me chuckle a little bit. But had a great practice. They ended up not signing me. Ended up basically saying, hey, we really like you. Keep working hard. You never know what's going to happen in the future.
Sure.
So that fell through. It wasn't hearing anything else really at that point from any other NFL teams, so began to consider the CFL. Thought I was going to get to play for a team in the Canadian League, and it fell through last minute, so that was disappointing. Had a contract for the AFL, Arena League. It fell through last minute. So it was just like one door after another over about a year's time, just kept closing. And throughout this time, I guess a really key point of my story was that I felt called to ministry about my sophomore year of college.
Yeah, you were really involved in campus ministry.
That's right.
ABS, Association of Baptist Students.
For BCMs, for college ministry.
Yeah, man, BCM, campus ministry is so important. Yep. And so you were called to ministry right there.
Yep, called to ministry, got to preach for the first time, and really thought after that, like, I don't want to do anything else with my life. However, and I even sought counsel in that moment, like, do I quit football?
Yeah.
Do I go attend a Bible school or something? And from at that point, a lot of mentors in my life counseled me, said that was not the best thing, that they thought that I should finish my career, finish my degree, and then I can go to seminary.
Sure.
I was really ignorant, had no idea about any of that stuff. And so I listened to them, ended up finishing it, and the rest is history. But throughout that year of being rejected and not knowing what was going to happen, the Lord began to cultivate in me, one, a sense of my sin associated with football, how much I enjoyed the limelight. So even though I said the right things in the interviews and would give credit to the Lord, that type of thing, I really enjoyed it too much. I was actually placing a lot of my value in that and being somebody and making something of myself. And so the Lord worked on that and just began to crush my idol. And at the same time, He was also growing my desire for ministry, for preaching the Bible, for teaching the Bible to people. I actually got to do a little interim pastorate, a little country church, Corinth Baptist Church, right outside of Magnolia. And that was where I realized I needed seminary, because I had no idea what I was doing. I was preaching through Philippians, and I was pretty much a John MacArthur and John Piper puppet, because I was like, I have no idea how to get a sermon out of this text. However, long story short, I get called back to Seattle the following year, do a rookie mini camp there. And it was there that the Lord cemented in my mind, okay, it's time to hang up the cleats, not pursue this dream anymore. Because at that point, I was still going hard, trying to get...
So you're training most days, and you're still on the grind.
6 days a week, busting it as hard as I can, trying to make a team, trying to give someone interest. And so I go back out to Seattle, and it was actually on the practice field, talking with Coach Pete Carroll, have the jersey on, have the helmet on. This has been my dream since I was watching Brett Favre as a 4- and 5-year-old, and wanting to do that, where I began to sense that the Lord was basically saying, like, yeah, this is not for you anymore. And my desires had changed. I called my wife and was like, hey, I'm actually excited to come home. Like, I think we need to move. And so at that point, we'd already decided to come to Kansas City. There was a big backstory between Southern and Midwestern. Ended up feeling that the Lord was leading us to Kansas City to attend Midwestern Seminary. And so, got off the plane. We moved about a month later.
Yeah. That's incredible. So as you walk through that journey of discerning God's call in your life, what would be some advice to the next generation, those coming up after you? What words of wisdom would you give them as they seek to explore God's call for their life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to break this up into two categories. So first, to discuss someone who doesn't necessarily feel the Lord leading you to ministry, but you just want to be a faithful follower of Christ in the public sphere, whatever that may be. The first thing I would say is figure out what you really enjoy doing. So if you have any desires, if you love to serve people, love to help people, if you like medicine, anyways like that, there's going to be numerous things, numerous desires.
Did you say if you like drugs? No. That's what I heard.
I mean, you could interpret it that way.
Oh, okay.
But more so meant like if you had a desire to help people.
Oh, okay.
Serve like a doctor.
Yeah, like a doctor. If you love sports and you think you could faithfully coach, or something like that. There's countless things you can do. So first,
I just didn't want you to go on record saying if you like drugs, just pursue that the rest of your life.
Dr. Allen's
That's right. That's right. This is why nuance is so incredibly important in this life. So first, figure out what you desire to do, what you like to do, what you could possibly do. Second, narrow it down and ask yourself, could you honor the Lord well in doing that? And for most of the things you would think of, the answer is going to be yes. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of freedom as a Christian to do a lot of different things for the glory of God. And so you don't have to feel like you're going to live a less than certain life if you're not doing what everyone thinks you should do or something like that. But ask yourself that question, can I bring glory to the Lord by doing this? And I would say probably most of the time, yes. So at that point, you're still probably going to have one or two things. And then I would say, how do you decide between those things? I think you ask yourself, another helpful question could be, what would make the most impact for the kingdom of Christ between those two jobs? And if there's a clear answer to that, actually, I think I could have a lot of opportunities to make much of Christ in this vocation. Then I think that could be the deciding factor between that. And then fourth, I would even challenge you just to do whatever it is well. That Christians should be the hardest workers. They should be the most consistent people. They should be the people with the most integrity. And it's in working hard, and it's in doing whatever God has called you to do, whatever ability He's given you to do, that you do it well. That's where I think Christ is going to be magnified and honored. And then I love R.C. Sproul, and one time I was reading a book here, he was trying to decide between, he said that the question was posed, I've got two godly women in front of me, and I don't know which one to choose. And he said, well, which one's more beautiful? And so there's a little humor there.
That's R.C. Sproul.
That's right, that's R.C. Sproul. And I just think that there's wisdom in that, to not overcomplicate this question in your life, that the Lord has given you great freedom in Christ, as long as there's no sin associated with what you want to do, to do what you desire and to do it well for His glory and for His kingdom. So I don't know if you guys have any follow-up thoughts.
That gives great freedom, though, because it's not a formula that you interject. It's, all right, God, what passions have you given me? Yeah. You mentioned John MacArthur shaping some of your thoughts early on. He wrote a book, Found God's Will, and he said, hey, if these 5 S's are true in your life, do whatever you want. Yeah. If you're saved, sanctified, submissive, spirit-filled, and willing to suffer.
Yep.
And you echo that. You're like, man, it's simple.
Yep. That's right.
So I think we tend to overcomplicate things.
Absolutely.
How did you see that playing out in your journey of the football career? Were you tempted to overcomplicate things? When did it become simple, or did it ever?
Yeah, I think I have always been one to overcomplicate things.
Sure.
My dad used to tell me all the time growing up, get out of your own head. Stop thinking too much. And so while that, for some people, they need to think more, I think I tend to scrutinize everything I did and just I was a worrier. And so I would say that for me, it became more clear after football was taken away. I would have said, if you were to ask me my entire football career and even my call to ministry, things like that, I had a pretty general roadmap before me. So I'm going to play football as long as I can. Yeah. Felt like there was a lot of opportunities to honor Christ by bringing attention to Him. If I got to play in the NFL, that would be a platform from which I could, share the gospel with my teammates, with others. Plus the compensation was great, so I could provide for my family, for seminary, that type of thing. So I knew that I have no guilty conscience about playing football as long as the Lord would allow. But and the plan was always to attend seminary after. But after the Lord took it away, that was where I felt like I had a crisis moment, where I felt like my identity was truly revealed, in the sense of, actually I have way more at stake in this than I had let on. And so that was the moment where I had to really think, am I content to just be a faithful Christian without football? And obviously the answer has to be yes, because that's not in my control. But I wanted my heart to be okay with that. I wanted my desires to be, yes, Lord, whatever, wherever, wherever you'd call. And so I think that there was a moment where my sin became real. My conviction to preach and teach the Bible also became real at that same time. It's almost like the Lord substituted one desire for another. So for me, it was relatively a simple process in one sense. It was a very painful one, but it wasn't overly complex, because at the same time the Lord was breaking me of sin, he was also revealing to me what I think he was calling me to do, which is to pursue ministry.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, as Ryan said, we overcomplicate that question, what's God's will for our life? And that kind of gives us a parameter. I've heard it described as more of like a target. You know, some people view God's will of your life, you got to hit the bullseye, but in reality, he's giving you a target, and as long as you're within the boundaries of what he says is good and right, then you're going to be perfectly fine. But what about the student who maybe is trying to wrestle through this call to ministry? We have a lot of listeners who are maybe thinking right now, is God calling me into some ministry, whether that's pastoral ministry or some type of student ministry, BCM ministry even? You know, what would you say to them to discern whether or not God's calling them to be a faithful follower of Christ in whatever vocation that they're in, or whether he's calling them to some type of like ministry leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the call to ministry is something that can be at one sense overcomplicated in the way we talk about it, and we can sometimes be unhelpful. So hopefully this will be a little bit more clarifying. And I think the first thing we need to establish is that it is a good and right thing to desire the ministry, that God has called certain people to be pastors and elders. And so I think that this is something that you should not be ashamed of. I've heard older preachers specifically where it was like they wanted to emphasize that they ran from the call. Yeah. And I'm like, I wouldn't encourage anybody to necessarily run from the call. Like, I think it's a glorious thing.
Didn't work out well for Jonah.
That's right. Yeah, you may end up in the big belly of a big fish. But I think it's something to be celebrated, that the Lord, in the Lord's kindness, there are certain men that he is going to set aside for. I'm particularly speaking of pastoral ministry, but women as well, for missionaries, that type of thing. And so 1 Timothy 3:1 says that if anyone aspires or desires the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. And so just have the freedom to say, like, what you're experiencing, if you desire the ministry, if you desire to be a pastor, to help people know Christ more, to help people understand the word more, to disciple people, to evangelize, those types of things, if that is what you want to do, that's a good thing. That Paul says that is a noble task that you're aspiring to, and to not run from that there is much joy. And if anything, I think that you will find more pain and heartache by running from that, if the Lord is truly calling you to it, than by submitting to it and giving into it. So the first thing is just, do you desire it or not? So if you're feeling a call, if you feel like there may be a call to ministry, do you aspire to what ministry is? Yeah. And make sure that you're not aspiring to a caricature of the ministry.
Wow.
Listen, the ministry is not for the faint of heart. Oftentimes in America, in our self-help generation, or past 50 years of this, we have turned the ministry into a vocation that could be very easy and very nonchalant, where as long as you have something good to say on Sunday mornings, you're pretty much good to go. You can fake it till you make it, kind of a deal. And I'm just saying that's not the biblical call to ministry. Yeah. Ministry is difficult. It is heartbreaking. It is heart-aching. And it is something that it can be, at the same time, one of the easiest vocations. It is rightly, I think, biblically, one of the hardest vocations to do well, because there's a lot more freedom. There's a lot more personal responsibility that you have to make it faithful.
You're going to have people that don't like you.
That's exactly right.
In the church and out of the church.
That's exactly right. And I think this is why Paul speaks of the spiritual burden of the churches too. Like, you oftentimes will know what people need to do, but if they're not willing to follow and be faithful, it will just break your heart that they're walking down a path that you know leads to destruction, yet they're unwilling to heed wise counsel. So the first thing is, do you desire that? Do you desire to truly help people? Not do you desire to go play golf 3 days a week and to hang out with youth groups and eat a lot of pizza.
Gosh, my golf game is embarrassing.
There you go. That's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Second, I would tell you that if you're discerning this call to ministry, go talk to your pastor or your elders or whatever the polity of your church is. Go speak to one of your mentors in the church, because ultimately there is no such thing as like a lone ranger Christian first and foremost, but there's also someone that can't just affirm their own call to ministry. I think that the local churches are the ones that appoint elders and teachers within the church, and so seek out counsel, wise counsel from your pastors, from your elders, on do they see this as well. And oftentimes my personal experience, and I've heard from others, is that they've been sensing that the same time you have, but they were waiting for you to maybe say something, and so Is that maybe even y'all's experience where you were sensing this
Sure.
and then you went to talk to somebody?
Yeah, and they just affirm that call in your life. So, but I'll tell you this also, sometimes they can affirm what's not the call in your life, and that's
Sure.
incredibly clarifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree completely. The third and final thought I'd add to those who are considering a call to ministry is to do your best to be prepared. That the call to ministry is one to prepare, to equip yourself, because ultimately, leaders in the church, Ephesians 4 tells us, are to equip the saints for the work of ministry. And so your job as a leader in this church, whatever it may be, is going to be equipping the saints. And if you notice, if you keep reading there in Ephesians 4, it's largely doctrinal, to know, to have the knowledge of the Son of God, so that they're not tossed to and fro by every wind of doctrine. So does that mean a seminary education? In our day and age, probably so. Doesn't always mean that. Martin Lloyd-Jones, Spurgeon, we could list countless, Bunyan, of others who were not formally trained. So it doesn't equal seminary education. However, my question would be, why would you not if you could? That it is such an accessible means for us to be more equipped, to learn from those who have gone before, and to challenge ourselves to be more equipped to rightly divide the word of truth. And so I would encourage you to get as much discernment from those in your life that can affirm or help you think through the issues, and then seek to figure out what that means when it comes to being equipped. Because you cannot give people what you do not know. You cannot be helpful if you do not have the Word of God within you and helping them understand it rightly. And so the other thing is, this is a plug for my beloved boss, Dr. Jason Allen. He wrote a book on this, Discerning Your Call to Ministry. So I would call you to get that book, read through it. I think it's very helpful. And I think you could get a lot of wisdom and further action steps to take.
Absolutely. I just gave that book to a young guy that just graduated from the U of A, and he's looking at going into ministry, and he's devouring it and discerning that call.
That's awesome. Yeah. Tyler, thank you for being with us so much. I got a couple questions still, though. You keep up with football much?
I have actually deleted the ESPN app on my phone because I found, I'm a lay pastor here in Liberty.
Sure.
I work a full-time job. I'm also a full-time PhD student. And I have 3 children.
I was about to say, you got a couple kids.
All right.
Yeah,
you stay stacked.
So I am, and so basically I found I can't do social media. Not that I think it's sinful or anything like that. I found it was probably actually sinful for me.
Sure.
But so eliminated that from my life, and then I found that I was actually replacing my time with the ESPN app. So if you would have asked me 6 months ago, did I follow football? The answer would have probably been yeah.
I want to know, Tyler. You're saying this in the off season.
Yeah, that's
that
true.
doesn't really mean a lot
that's
when it comes to the season.
You're probably calling my bluff actually.
Okay, so a little bit of revealing stuff. Who was the toughest opponent you played in the GAC?
Oh man, Harding.
Harding.
Yeah, Harding University. And it was largely, they were very disciplined.
Sure.
And so we were not able to sneak many things past them. And to be honest, I was just very unsuccessful in my career against Harding.
Yep.
So we beat up on OBU when we played there. They were usually pretty good.
Oh man, talking smack. Dr. Sells has been on the podcast. Several other football guys have been on the podcast.
I think I was 3-4 versus OBU, and that was really fun. We had a harder time with Henderson too.
Yep.
But Harding, I found that they were, for the Christian school, I know OBU is Christian as well, they were the dirtiest, I think, that I played. I found my ankles getting twisted more against Harding. I found a lot more trash talk against Harding. But they were they were fearless.
Sure.
They would throw their bodies around on the field. I think I got hit the most, it felt like, against Harding.
We've got a lot of listeners that play or hang out in the GAC conference. The last thing, what's the greatest leadership lesson that you have learned from being a quarterback?
Oh man, that's a great question. I wish you would have asked me this before. I'm going to say something, then I'm going to kick myself in a couple of minutes. And actually, it could have been this. I think that from playing quarterback, that I would probably wrap it up with integrity is essential.
Wow.
Because I my whole time in college, at SAU in college, I was an outspoken evangelical Christian, so they knew that. But if I was not consistent with it, if I did not have the life to back it up, if I was not willing to be there for my teammates and to give them rights, whatever it may be, like love them in physical, tangible ways, to where they saw that I wasn't just simply telling them the gospel, but I was actually trying to love them well. I think that was one of the biggest things that I learned with playing quarterback, and specifically just being around my teammates, is that, man, being a leader is first and foremost, in a lot of ways, being a person of integrity, being someone that can be trusted, that you're not going to be a hypocrite. You're not going to say you're all in and then give halfway effort or that type of thing. So
Wow.
I think that's what I'd say for now.
That's a
That's a
good
good
word.
answer.
Tyler, thank you so much for joining us on the Lead Defend podcast. And we have to get you to Arkansas to come
Yeah,
hang out with some folks
Sure.
again.
Would love
So,
to.
we'll
Yeah,
make it
my
happen.
parents would really appreciate that.
That's
I
good.
bet they would,
That's good.
especially seeing those grandkids.
That's right. As much
Hey,
as they can.
remember to put on your calendar the Lead Defend conference. Go to leaddefend.org to find out more information. And until next time, it's been a joy.
That's it for this episode of Lead Defend. To hear more episodes from the Lead Defend crew, visit absc.org/podcasts. If you liked what you heard, rate and review us on your favorite podcast listening site. Want to learn more information about the next Lead Defend conference? Visit leaddefend.org.